classes of factors that affect happiness. At first, happiness might not seem like a good topic for scientific study, but lots of scientists have used psychology to study positive emotions and happiness. One of the groups that studies happiness is the Positive Psychology Department at the University of Pennsylvania. This is headed by Dr. Seligman, who is a professor of psychology and a best-selling author. He's written 200 articles and 20 books, including the book Authentic Happiness, which I used for my project. Positive psychology is the study of the strengths and virtues that allow people to be happy and flourish. The three main components of happiness are pleasure, gratification, and meaning. Pleasure is positive emotion and it's experienced by the senses. Pleasure can be things like eating delicious foods or taking a cool swim on a hot day. Gratification is when one is engaging their skills and strengths and is completely engaged in the experience. Sometimes the pursuit of gratification can even be unpleasant, like running a marathon, but it always increases the person's overall happiness. Meaning goes beyond the gratification of one specific task and focuses on living a life full of meaningful and important activities. The other components to happiness are circumstances, which make up 10% of happiness, genes, which make up 50% of happiness, and intentional activity, which makes up 40% of happiness, and is activities that people choose to do. In the happiness surveys I conducted, the participants provided information on aspects of themselves, such as birth order, which is the oldest, youngest, or middle child, gender, and race, and other things, so I could test if these factors would affect their happiness. To find out what the person's happiness score was, I asked questions on things like their general happiness, their usual mood, and their happiness with life. And I added all the answers up to determine the happiness score. My hypothesis was that membership in clubs and teams, playing instruments, and hours of sleep would be the factors that I tested that most affected happiness. I tested them all with my surveys, and these are the graphs that I got. This is from membership in clubs and teams, and it didn't have a very big effect on happiness because there's only a range of 3 between the highest group and the lowest group. But the club and team members ended up being happier. This is for hours of sleep, which did have a bigger effect on happiness because the highest people who got 10 hours of sleep were much higher than the people who got 7 hours or less, who only got 36. Gender affected happiness moderately, and there was a medium range, and it turned out that the girls were happier. Playing instruments didn't affect happiness that much, and there was only a range of 2 between the highest and lowest. But the people who played instruments were happier. Race affected happiness a lot, and it turned out that the happiest people were the Caucasians and the least happy people were Hispanic. Birth order was another factor that affected happiness, and it had like a mediate range. Race and hours of sleep had the most effect on happiness, and playing instruments and membership in clubs and teams had the lowest effect on happiness. So my hypothesis was only partially proved. And a further question for this topic would be, would these factors still affect people of different age groups? Any questions?